Now, it may seem strange to you to include Freemasonry in a study of the various cults and sects like Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and so on. But in fact, I do believe that it is a religion. It's not just a brotherhood, it is a religious fellowship. And I've been told that by many Freemasons themselves. Now, I wasn't very interested in this because my father wasn't, and I never came up against it until my first church, or one of the first churches I looked after. And the first funeral of a man came round, and somebody in the church came to me and said, you do know, of course, that it's a Masonic funeral. Well, I didn't. And I learned then what a Masonic funeral was. Then I discovered, to my surprise, that every man in the church was a Freemason. I was the only one who wasn't. So I began to ask questions and find out more and ask why they had become Freemasons. And then after a little while I was under some pressure from some of them to join myself, and I knew that many ministers had done so, and so I tried to find out as much as I could about it. I didn't join them. Now, there are very different opinions about Freemasonry, ranging from one end, treating it as a comparatively harmless thing, to the other end, thinking it's a kind of mafia, a kind of dangerous, subversive society, and everything in between. Mind you, I think the various lodges have varied, and in American history there are some pretty blood-curdling chapters in the history of Masonry. And once again, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has written about that side. Now, is it just a kind of harmless, upper-class friendly society, as I've heard it described? Is it simply a harmless thing that those who like to join in can do so? It's defined as a social institution of a charitable outlook which adds the spice of interest in secret rites and gaudy insignia. Well, now that's quite a definition. I think that's an official definition. Other people, I mean a dictionary definition, other people have called it Rotary with ritual. And if you've been a Rotarian or been in a Rotary Club, you'll appreciate that one. Is it just an evening away from the wife with a bit of pretentious title and dressing up added in for spice, or is it in fact a harmful thing? I remember the first few days I was in Aden, I was in an Arab taxi, and you pray when you're in an Arab taxi, and I was really concentrating on my life, really, but I noticed that at a certain point, the Arab, who was looking anywhere but at the road ahead, looked at a certain building and spat at it through the open window. And I asked him why he did that, and he muttered something in Arabic, and I said, would you translate that? And he put it in English, House of Satan. And when I asked what it actually was, I was told it was the local lodge, temple. And in fact, this is what the Arabs thought of it and still do. Is he right? Now, let me say straight away, I'm concerned with Masonry, not with Masons. And I don't want anything I say to be taken as a reflection on anyone who is a Mason as a person. I'm speaking about the system. Just as, for example, I distinguish in my thinking between Catholicism as a system and Catholics who are people, and some of them fine Christians, I believe, I would distinguish between Freemasonry and Masons. So I'm talking about the system and what it believes. Here is a fuller definition which I've come across. It is a non-sectarian fraternity teaching a lofty system of morality and basic religion in symbols, the members bound by oath never to reveal its modes of recognition or ritual. And I'm going to build what I have to say about that. The first big difference between this religion and all the other ones that I've mentioned, or this sect or cult, is that this one is, of course, for men only. That is one of its biggest appeals. And I hope you ladies won't be offended by that, but men do like to be on their own sometimes. And when I asked the men in my first church, that's the plug for the Men's Contact Club, but when I asked the men in my first church, why did you all join? Almost to a man they said this: away in the army during the war, we had tremendous fellowship with men. It was a man's world. And when we came back from the war, we missed this man's world. And there we were, sort of tied down to the house and the washing up, and we no longer had this male fellowship, and so we joined the lodge to get it again. And I think most of them were quite sincere in saying that. Now then, to give you something of the history, and by the way, I've got to say, what have I said? Hun?
Where's your present?
Your present.
Sorry. Whoever listens to this tape will wonder what on earth is wrong with you all. Well, now, to give you a bit of the history, let me begin by saying that I've had to get it all second-hand. I'm not a Mason, I haven't been a Mason, and one of the problems about this cult is that Masons themselves will never discuss it with you, or ought not to. And so one has to get one's knowledge as best one can. And all I can say is that I'm giving you to the best of my knowledge what I understand about it. If I'm wrong in details, which I may be, I think I've got most of it accurately, but if there are any Masons here, I'd be very interested if you would tell me afterwards if I've been reasonably near the truth. It started as quite a simple society, a very simple thing. In the Middle Ages, there were a group of builders who used to travel around Europe, and indeed went to Africa and the Far East, building churches, cathedrals, and temples. They were specially skilled as stone workers or masons. Most of them were unmarried, and so they advertised themselves as free to travel. There were fixed masons who were married and settled, and they did all the local work. But there were free masons who traveled around putting up temples, and many of the cathedrals of Europe were put up by these free masons, masons who were free to travel. So they put up their cathedral wherever it was, and they lived in small huts around the cathedral. And in the middle of the camp was a larger hut, which was their social center, where they gathered in the evening to sing and to drink and do other things. And that was called their lodge. So the lodge was the social center of the Masons who were free to travel and build anywhere in the world. Now that's how it all started, and that's utterly simple and straightforward. Later, they opened their membership to other kinds of Mason, and the other kind were called accepted Masons, and they were allowed to join in the social life in the lodge. Later still, an accepted Mason could be a butcher or a baker or another trade. He was still called a Mason, but he was accepted by the others. Nowadays, of course, nearly all Masons are accepted Masons. Not many of them can work stone. And now the word free has passed down, and instead of hearing the term accepted Masons, you'll hear the term Freemasons used indiscriminately of them all. This soon developed into quite an organization, because they were strangers in foreign lands when they were building the cathedrals. And now and again, other people used to try and get into the lodge and try and join in and try and break it up. So they developed a system of having passwords and putting a guard on the door of the lodge, and you had to have the right secret word or the secret sign to get in. This was purely as a measure of protection. They could have issued membership cards, but they didn't. They just shared the secret password and handshake with those whom they knew and welcomed them in. So there was nothing sinister about this. It was very straightforward, very simple. After a bit, over the years, they developed certain ceremonies of initiation, and since it had all originated in building, of course, most of the ceremonies were based on terms from builders. If ever you've used the phrase "on the level," then you're using a very typical Masonic phrase, which is, of course, a phrase for setting the block of stone in order and being square with somebody. The word square means something different now, I know, but if you're square with somebody, it meant you were true, you were faithful, you could be relied on, you were a good job. Now, in 1717, and this is the first key date, these various lodges of Freemasons traveling around putting up buildings decided to join together in some kind of almost a trade union. And they formed what they called the Grand Lodge in the Apple Tree Tavern in London. And the Grand Lodge became the center of the organized lodges or guilds of Masons all over Europe. So that in fact, I suppose it began in Britain. And in 1813, this finally became what we've got today, the United Grand Lodge of Ancient Freemasons of England, of which the Duke of Edinburgh is the Grand Master. Incidentally, every male of our royal family since then has been a Mason except one, and that one was George V. And he started the initiation, but the more he learned about it, the more unhappy he became, and he withdrew. And it caused quite a stir at the time, because he was the first royal male to withdraw. But George VI was, the Duke of Edinburgh is, and they're continuing. I've no doubt that Prince Charles will soon be introduced. Now, so far, until 1813, it was comparatively simple and straightforward. There were now people in it who were not stonemasons, but they were accepted into the organization. But from that, it developed increasingly into a secret society. Long after it became necessary to have a secret handshake and sign, long after they needed to protect their lodges from foreigners wanting to get in who would break it up, they developed more and more things that were secret, simply for the sake of being secret, without a reason for it. And from being a very simple society, it became quite a complicated one. Now, then, at this point, we've got to ask how many of their secrets are known. And my guess is pretty well everything. I think the biggest secret about Freemasonry is that there is no secret. But I may be quite wrong about this. But I think there are sufficient channels now wide open to find out as much as you want to know about it, probably too much. But there are very few things that are not widely known. Some of you may have seen a television program about, 4 years ago or 3 years ago on this, and learned quite a bit there. Now, what is not always realized is this. Some of these secrets are kept from everybody outside the movement. But there are other secrets that are kept from people inside the movement, and this is not always realized. In other words, the day you join, you're not told all the secrets. So don't think you will be. You may. You ladies can't anyway. You can just go along to their dinners. Well, now, take first of all what they keep secret from the outside. Well, the best known, of course, is the hand grip, the words that are used, the rites and ceremonies, the symbols and the signs. And somebody has said the one thing taken seriously is the preservation of secret grips and words that enable a man to show he is a Freemason. I remember at a big do I had once, the local vicar was present and a Baptist minister. The Baptist minister came up to me. He said, "Here, your new vicar's a Freemason." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Well, I gave him the grip and he gave it back to me." That was it. So it's as widely known as that. Well, now, one of the things that is normally kept secret is the oath which is taken when you become an apprentice Mason. Incidentally, you notice all these building terms come through. When you first join, you're an apprentice, and you will soon be put on the square and on the level. But I want to read you the oath that, as far as I know, is the oath which is called upon for the degree of entered apprentice. I, in the presence of the great architect of the universe, you notice that builders think of God as an architect here. and of this worthy and worshipful lodge of ancient, free, and accepted Masons, regularly assembled and properly dedicated of my own free will and accord, do hereby and hereon most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will always heal, conceal, and never reveal any part or parts, point or points of the secrets or mysteries of or belonging to free and accepted Masons in Masonries, which may heretofore have been known by, shall now, or may at any future period be communicated to me, unless it be to a true and lawful brother or brethren, and not even to him or them until after due trial, strict examination, or a full conviction that he or they are worthy of that confidence, or in the body of a lodge just, perfect, and regular. I further solemnly promise that I will not write those secrets, indite, carve, mark, engrave, or otherwise delineate them, or cause or suffer the same to be done by others, if in my power to prevent it, upon anything movable or immovable under the canopy of heaven, whereby or whereupon any letter, character, or figure, this is still the first sentence, by the way, I think a lawyer must have written this, or the least trace of any letter, character, or figure may become legible or intelligible to anyone in the world, so that our secrets, arts, and hidden mysteries may improperly become known, and that through my unworthiness. Now listen to this. These several points I solemnly swear to observe without evasion, equivocation, or mental reservation of any kind, under no less a penalty on the violation of any or either of them than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by the roots, and my body buried in the sand of the sea at low water mark, or a cable's length from the shore where the tide regularly ebbs and flows twice in every 24 hours, or the less hurried but no less effective punishment of being branded as a willfully perjured individual, void of all moral worth, and totally unfit to be received into this worshipful lodge or any other warranted lodge, or society of men who prize honour and virtue above the external advantages of rank and fortune. So help me God, and keep me steadfast in this my great and solemn obligation, being that of an entered apprentice Freemason. For the second degree, it's your heart torn out, and your third degree, your bowels torn out and burnt. But you notice that in place of that, it's either that or being thrown out of the lodge, and it's quite clear that it's the second that is usually applied. Now, what is wrong with taking an oath like that? Well, if it's taken seriously, of course, it's an illegal murder pact. Certainly the second and third degree. But it's obviously not taken seriously. It could be described as an adult cowboys and Indians thing. And yet, should an adult take words like that upon him and bring God's name into such a statement? It's the origin of the children's phrase, cut my throat and hope to die. And this is how it's filtered through to children's level. But should someone do this? There are two results of this secrecy in keeping things from people outside. Three results, in fact, which are not good. The first is, you cannot know enough about it before joining. And I don't think anyone should be asked to join something before they know enough about it. And if you can't know before you join, this is something that clearly you cannot join. No Christian should get into something until he knows what it is. Secondly, to keep it secret from the outside does exclude any form of supervision or control. And this is why the Roman Catholics now absolutely forbid priest and people to become Masons, because they could not then tell certain things to the priest. And thirdly, it does mean that they will never engage in wholesome discussion. And there's something unhealthy about any movement that you cannot discuss openly. Above all, I think any movement that causes a husband to have an area of his life that his wife cannot ever share is something that needs examination. Now, the second thing I said was that there are secrets not only kept from the outsiders, but from inside. And this is the point of having first, second, and third degrees and other varying degrees within them. It's not so often realized that when you're an entered apprentice or a fellow craft or a master mason, which includes the supreme order of the Holy Arch, all this is something that you've got to wait for to know after you've joined, you still don't get to know it all. There is a claim to have some great inner secret that not even the ordinary Masons know. And it's supposed to be connected with the name of God. And I'll tell you in a moment what the name is. It is the big secret. But it is not revealed at stage 1 or even at stage 2. There are secrets at stage 3 about the name of God that are revealed. And it's very revealing what that secret is, as I'll come in a moment. Now, the third thing I want to say, I've got the right rubber this time, which takes it into the religious realm and a bit further, and I'm going to use a word which you may not know or have come across, but it's a good one. It is a syncretistic society. There's a word for you to take home. But that word is the only one I can think of that conveys, and it begins with an S too, but it's the only one I can think of that conveys what I want to say. The word syncretist really means to take different things and blend them together. And Masonry has taken different religions and blended them together. It has taken a bit from this and a bit from that and a bit from the other and put it into one and syncretized it, brought it together into one whole. And this is where we'll begin to ask the question, is it a religion or is it not? Masons would deny that it is a denomination, and they would say this: it is not a religion, it is in fact religion. That's how it's been put, for example, by Dr. Fort Newton. Masonry is not a religion, it is religion. And so we've got to look at what kind of religion it is. And here I want to tell you certain things. First of all, a Mason may practice any religion or none and be a Mason. He can join the Masons from any religion in the world. He may have no religion when he joins. Doesn't matter. He can still come in. As the first page of the Masonic Bible says, Masonry encourages each man to be steadfast in the faith his heart loves best. And therefore it includes Mohammedans, Buddhists, Jews, Hindus, Christians. And it's been said that its universality is its boast. In its language, citizens of every nation may converse. At its altar, men of all religions may kneel, and to its creed, disciples of every creed may subscribe. Funnily enough, you may come in from any religion, but you must not bring that religion in with you. The religion from then on is the Masonic one, the one that will not divide men. And just as in certain areas of polite society, you mustn't mention religion or politics, so you must not go into the lodge to talk about your religion. You go in to talk about the Masonic principles of religion. Secondly, you may come with any or no religion, but you have joined a body that is very religious. In one church I had a Grand Master of a local lodge who attended the church for a bit after I came and then told me quite frankly, my religion and yours don't mix, and the religion that I have I find in the lodge. And he was quite frank about it. Well, now what do they do that's religious? Well, they do just about everything we do. They've got their orders of worship, they have their hymns, they have their prayers, they have all kinds of things. Originally, of course, they built places of worship, and you would imagine that they discussed religion in the lodge quite a lot. Because, you see, when you've built a cathedral one year and a Hindu temple the next, you're bound to start discussing in the lodge religion. And they came to the conclusion that all religions were right and all were wrong, and the best thing was to sort of have a general religion instead of these particular things. They weren't the first to feel the problem of the different religions of the world. Now, the initiation ceremony has a great deal in common with baptism. It's quite striking. It's a bit more shocking experience, and I'm going to hold up a photograph now. I don't know if you can see this, but here's a man dressed for the initiation ceremony. It's a bit embarrassing and a bit degrading, but I want you to know all the secrets. He's got his left breast bared over his heart, his trouser leg rolled up, he's got a noose around his neck, and he's blindfolded. And it's literally a traumatic experience from which he never recovers. And in a sense, a man who's prepared to go through that is pretty well bound by embarrassment to the lodge from then on. And I'm quite sure he wouldn't like his wife to see him at the moment. But there is a form of renunciation, there is a form of burial, which you saw on the TV program, in which someone is buried out of sight. And there is this initiation ceremony which is almost a counterfeit of Christian baptism, and a notion of being dead, buried and raised again to a new life in this religion. Now, in France, the Masons deleted all reference to God, partly connected with the French Revolution. But in England, belief in God is vital to it. Religion, says one Mason, is the soul of Masonry. It is its apex, its basis, its light and its power. Man is never closer to God than when he kneels spiritually naked at the altar of Masonry. That's quite a claim, and many men do believe it. Furthermore, Masonry uses religious language again and again and again, studying all the vows and all the ceremonies, and I've been through pages and pages of them, and they use religious language all the time. Now, some of this, of course, do you mind if I sort of scrub the board now, or come back up the top? Some of this is due to the fact that it started with building, and they can't get rid of this idea that God is he's a square God. He's an architect. He's not so much a father to them, he's the architect, the great designer. And of course, if you've ever been on a building job and seen the place the architect has in it, you can understand how they came to think of God like that. You know, he's the man who comes and tells them what to do. He's the man who comes and tells them they've put that up wrongly. He's the man who comes and tells them, pull that down, that's no good. And this sort of gave them their conception of God, the great architect of the universe. Compasses form a very common symbol. I'm sure you've seen the compasses inscribed on a Masonic building. And these phrases on the square and on the level are related also. Some of their teaching came from Judaism, because the greatest ecclesiastical building of all time, of course, was Solomon's Temple. And they talk a lot about Solomon's Temple. I meant to bring to you tonight a little piece of the white stone from Solomon's Quarries, which I brought back from Jerusalem. I got it in a shop just outside Solomon's Quarries. But in the shop were dozens and dozens of little hammers made for Masonic Lodge meetings out of stone from Solomon's Quarries. And there's quite a lot of Jewish background linked in with it. Then there's quite a lot, more than a lot, of the ancient Eastern mystery religions in Masonry. And you can trace the origin of the language back to the very religions that the early Christians had such a problem with their secret rites of initiation and so on. One religion in particular, called Gnosis, or knowledge, G-N-O-S-I-S, from which we get the word agnostic, which means someone without knowledge. Gnosis, or knowledge, was one of the mystery religions in Paul's day, and it's clearly mentioned in the New Testament many times, and you can find an awful lot of that in Freemasonry. Then there's an awful lot that's come through from mythology of ancient Greece and ancient Egypt and India even, and worship of the sun and stars seems to have come in at a certain point. And then there's quite a lot of the occult in it. In some Masonic ritual, for example, they use the swastika, if I've got it right way round. That came to them through an unusual group called the Rosicrucians. But you find this amazing mixture of religious language from all over the place. Bits out of the Bible, bits out of the occult, all over the place. And here is a hymn from the Entered Apprentice's hymn book. Bacchus died and rose again on the golden Asian plain. Osiris rose from out the grave, and thereby mankind did save. Adonis likewise shed his blood by the yellow Syrian flood. Zoroaster brought to birth Mithra from his cave of earth. And today in Christian lands we with them can join our hands. Now, what a mixture. If you recognized all the gods and other things, it seems to be like a snowball. As these men went around building temples, cathedrals, and all kinds of shrines, the snowball picked a little bit of everything up, just as when you're rolling a snowball you pick up leaves and stones and all sorts of things, and when the snow melts you're left with a little heap of all kinds of stuff. Now the fourth thing and the last under this heading is this. Masonry claims to be religion. It's not just a brotherhood for mutual support and looking after each other's orphans and so on. It is a religion. And here is one of the statements I came across. In its form of worship, all religions can unite. Even our so-called Christian degrees have taken on a Christian colour because we are Christians and not because they are in essence Christian. That's the statement of a Mason. I've heard some people say there are Christian lodges. There aren't. There are lodges of Christians. That's a different thing. And a book that reveals that is Christian by Degrees, which is quite a devastating exposure of those who claim that some of the degrees are in fact Christian. In other words, if you've got a bunch of Hindus in a lodge, it's likely to have a Hindu flavour. Not because the religion is Hindu, but because the Hindus are in it. And if you have a lot of Christians in a lodge, there is, I gather, a Baptist minister's lodge, but the main denomination affected in England are the Anglicans. No Roman Catholics are Masons. The Anglicans are riddled with it. Many of the bishops, if not most, are Masons. The Methodists come second in it. Baptists have some. I talked to the Salvation Army General recently, and he told me that even the Salvation Army is having problems with this, with officers who are joining it. And so it's really got right through, one way and another. But the point is, even if you had a lodge made entirely of bishops, as I think you have in one case, it is a Christian lodge not because the religion is Christian, but because they add the Christian flavour to it. It is not in itself a Christian thing. Now I'm going to come right to the sort of crunch and say, what do Christians say about Freemasonry? I'm sorry, before I do, I think I'd better say what they say about Christians, because that'll just pull it together. In the 1723 constitutions, they cut out all references to Christian things and stated all candidates, Christian or otherwise, come to us in a state of darkness. In other words, you haven't seen the light until you're in, Christian or not. About the Bible, they say it is the volume of the sacred law, but the whole includes God's revelation through the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, and once again you have the snowball operating. The whole lot. The Bible is only one among others. There is one American lodge that will have nothing to do with the Bible, but most say it's one of the great lights. Now, what about God? Now, when you first join, you are told that God is the architect. That's the name you use. When you go into the second degree, you will be given the Hebrew letters, JHVH, the letters of Jehovah. But when you enter the third degree, the great secret of who God really is comes out. And I've got here a drawing, a very rough drawing, of the altar top of the Holy Arch Ceremony. Let me try and... This is the kind of thing you'll see. I'm running out of chalk. Does anybody know where there's any more? Well, probably not. That's Hebrew as... you got these. Sorry. Thank you. This is fine, thank you. Now, that's Jehovah split up into bits. A kind of Trinitarian representation. There's a sort of Trinity in the middle. But now look what comes in here. Yah, bull, and on. That's not, no, it's on, upside, sorry. It's still the same way the other way up, but that's upside down. Now then, here we have Jehovah, the Hebrew God. But in the middle, look what a mixture we've got. We've got Yah, the beginning of the word Jehovah, from the Hebrews. You've got bull, which is Baal, the worship of Baal that Elijah had to try and fight. And On is one of the old Egyptian gods. And so the deepest secret is this, that it is a religion claiming to combine all other religions. And that secret will be imparted to you at the third degree. What do they say about Christ? Since 1723, the name of Christ has been excluded from all their ritual. And quite recently, about 18 months ago, there was a Masonic service in Canterbury Cathedral that didn't mention the name of Jesus. I think that's a very interesting thing. I heard of a Jewish rabbi called Max Wertheimer who joined the Masons because Christ was not mentioned, and then he was converted and became a Christian, so he had to leave them. Now that was a Jewish rabbi joining because Christ wasn't in it, and then finding Christ, and he had to leave it because Christ wasn't in it. So that's very interesting. Salvation, here we come again to the thing that we found in Seventh-day Adventists to a degree, and we found last time also. It is clearly based on man's works. You live on the level, you live on the square, God will accept you. It is not salvation by grace, it is salvation by works, and you must work for it. About the church, one quotation should be enough. It is well for a man to be born in a church, but terrible for him to die in one. For in religion there must be growth. A young man is to be censured who fails to attend the church of his nation. The elderly man is equally to be censured if he does attend. He ought to have outgrown what the church offers and to have attained a higher order of religious life. Now, what do Christians think about Freemasonry, finally? I've told you what the Catholics think about it. 9 popes have condemned it, and no priest or Roman Catholic man may join. As far as the Protestants go, I've told you the Anglicans, after one attempt to discuss it, resisted strongly in 1951, and resulting in this man's having to leave England. Walton Hanna is the man who has produced by far the best books on Freemasonry yet. The first one, Darkness Visible, is about the first degree, and Christian by Degrees about the other 2. And he's now hidden away in a community in Canada. But he was an Anglican clergyman who tried to get rid of it out of the Church of England in 51. And he fought very hard, but he realized he was up against too much. And he finally had to leave England. As I've said, some Baptists are, more Methodists are. Among evangelical Christians, there seems to be a universal consensus of opinion that it is incompatible with the evangelical understanding of the Christian faith. William Booth said, "No language of mine could be too strong in condemning any officer's affiliation with a society which shuts Christ out of its temples, and which in its religious ceremonies gives neither him nor his name any place." Charles Finney, who was a Freemason in his early life, said, "The fact is that Freemasonry is the most anomalous, absurd, and abominable institution that can exist in a Christian country." D.L. Moody said, "I do not see how any Christian, most of all a Christian minister, can go into these secret lodges with unbelievers." You can't even join the Irish Baptist Church if you're a Freemason. I found that when I went to Belfast. It's one of the questions they ask when you come. I'm not sure that that's right. I think there's only one condition of membership, and that is that you belong to Christ. But there it is. As far as behavior goes, there's not a great deal wrong with their behavior, because, in fact, their behavior will reflect the general decencies of society. It is their beliefs that are so difficult. And the man who called it the devil's imitation of Christian fellowship was, I think, perhaps pointing at least to one truth about it. It is basically that it denies the exclusiveness of Christianity. Now, either Christianity is the only true religion, or all have some truth in. Either Jesus was right when he said, "No man comes to the Father but by me, and there is no other name among men given under heaven whereby we must be saved except Jesus." Either that is true, or this kind of amalgamation is the truth. There's a kind of ecumenical movement in this, applied to all religions, that says the truth is to be found in them all. And so I've tried to be as fair as I can. My knowledge is limited, because I've had to get it all second-hand. I've not relied solely on Walton Hannah, though I think his books are excellent. If you are really wanting to look at this from a Christian point of view, there you are, by an Anglican clergyman. I've talked to Masons, and I've found some that are willing to talk. I've met a lot of Masons who became Christians and left as a result. And you can leave. In England. In America you couldn't, at least in the 19th century, but in England today you can leave, or you can just stop going. And I don't think you would suffer very greatly. So there it is. My overall impression the challenge of it is this. Christianity began as a religion for men. I know there were women, I know there were children, but Jesus called 12 men. 12 working men. Oh, they were mixed. Some worked with their hands, some worked with their heads. I think it's a tragedy that Christianity has come to be thought of as a religion for women and children. And as David Barter mentioned, women who've got older. I believe that Christianity is for everybody. But I'm always very unhappy when there aren't as many men as women in a church. And I'm also unhappy when men say to me, I had to go into the lodge to find real religion among men. And they have said this to me. And so I would preach a religion of men and women and children. But I shall never cease to be grateful to God that he put me in the RAF as a chaplain for 3 years, where our congregations were 95% and more men. For the first time, I think, I found myself in congregations where there were far more men than women. And it seemed so wonderful to see men in the brotherhood of Christ, not separating themselves off from the women, because I don't think the answer is to turn the men's contact club into a church and say let the men go on Wednesdays or whenever it is, and the women and children can come on Sundays. I don't think that's the answer. We may have to have separate meetings for men to get them interested first. But I want to see a church where there are as many men as women, young as old, where everybody comes and say, this is fellowship, this is truth, this is religion. I find everything I need at the religious level here. And I think if people found that, Freemasonry would die a natural death. Why do young men join Freemasonry? Some people say it's because they get benefits if they're going to be in the commercial world and so on. It may be true that sometimes there are benefits. I honestly don't think that is the main reason. I think it is that here is a religion that is respectable for men and a brotherhood that they are prepared to accept. And until we offer in the church a religion that means much more and a brotherhood that is much deeper, then I think we must be fair to those who have joined this one. Well, now, thank you for listening.